Good morning, everyone. We will call the meeting of the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission to order for Wednesday, October 6, 2021. Let the record show all commissioners present, with Commissioner Bollinger present by telephone. Our order of business is our first item on the agenda this morning. Is there any changes or corrections to the order of business, Mr. Hadley?
Mr. Chairman, good morning. No, there are no changes.
Okay, seeing no changes to the order of business. Commissioners, do you have anything? Now I'd look for a motion to approve.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the order of business as stated.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The order of business is approved. Okay. Item 2 on our order of business this morning is the minutes of the previous session of September 15, 2021. Has everybody had a chance to review those? Is there any changes or corrections to those minutes? If not, I'd look, excuse me? Oh. Now I'd look for a motion to approve.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
We have a motion by Commissioner Dukart.
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Franchuk. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, we will move on to our action items this morning. Item 1 is a rezone request. This is to consider a rezone REZ-007-21 for the zone change from agricultural to rural residential for 34 acres located in the southwest quarter, all in Section 20, Township 140 North, Range 96 of the 5th Principal Meridian, along the 34th Street Southwest, City of Dickinson, ETZ, Stark County, North Dakota. Mr. Hadley.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This request, item 1 and 2 are tied together. It's one project. So this is a zone change that enables the final plat that's in item 2 to move forward. This has been advertised. There hasn't been any public comment except for one neighbor in the Maury Bang subdivision that had concerns about access and drainage issues. And I believe the applicant can address that. They were addressing it with the particular owner to the west, and there's some access issues that we'll talk about in the plat. So
Okay, are we doing
with that, staff would recommend approval based on the request, and I believe the applicant is here.
We're going to do a public hearing
They're all
separately?
public hearings, sir. Yes.
Separately, okay.
Separate motions.
Does anybody from the applicant have any comments regarding the rezoning request?
Thank you, Commissioners. Andrew Schrank with Highlands Engineering, representing the applicant for this application. The property is located about a half-mile west of State Avenue. It's on the north side of 34th Street Southwest. As indicated, it's just east of the Maury Bang Piney Acres West subdivision. That subdivision consists of lots in the 4 to 5 acre range. This property consists of 34 acres. Our plan would be to subdivide this into 26 lots that are just over an acre. And our feeling, this provides a nice transition between the larger lots of Maury Bang and some of the smaller lots that have been platted to the southeast in Cook Meadow Hills 5th Edition. So it's kind of a nice transition from those city lots out to the larger 4 or 5 acre lots in Maury Bang. With that, I'd open it up for any questions on this rezone.
Thank you, Mr. Schrank.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any questions for the applicant? All right. Any other comments from city staff regarding this rezone request?
No, sir.
Okay, at this time, we will then open the public hearing regarding the acre subdivision rezone. Anybody in the public or online at 701-456-7006 have any comments or concerns regarding this rezoning request? Please step forward to the podium and state your name. Good morning.
Good morning.
State your name, please.
I am Jackie Jenkin. I am part of the Maury Bang West Piney Acres subdivision.
Okay.
Deb Geiger, also part of the Maury Bang Piney Acres subdivision.
Welcome.
Thank you.
We actually have petitioned against this to preserve our character of our lots. While I understand Dickinson is growing, it also takes away from the character of our subdivision. So we are in opposition against this.
Okay.
I guess part of the thing that we would like to suggest is that it be more like ours, that it wouldn't, you know, I realize you guys probably do want to bring it into the city, but if the lots were made bigger and everybody had their own septic system and it was a private road and it is like our subdivision, that is no expense to the city. And some of the subdivisions, I know that when Maury tried to do another subdivision, he was put down that he could not because some of the subdivisions weren't full. And they were requiring that some of the other subdivisions fill before he started another subdivision.
Okay.
I guess that's where we're at with it. And since ours is a private road, we have, you know, the covenant in place that if they were also to do little bigger lots to be able to have their own septic system and then have water, have a private road, it would duplicate our subdivision.
Okay. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Ms. Jankin or Ms. Geiger? Okay. All right. I think we'll let the applicant address some of your questions and concerns, if that's okay.
Okay?
Yep. You guys have anything else, you can step back up after we're done.
Okay.
Yep.
Mr. Schrank, would you like to touch base on some of that?
Thank you again, Commissioners. Yeah, I'll just kind of go through some of their concerns here. As we indicated, I think making this more similar to what Maury Bang is doesn't provide that transition that I think makes sense in this case. We already have Cook subdivision is about a half-mile away. Those lots are in that 10,000 or less, square foot range. So it is starting to decrease in density as you move away from Maury Bang. We feel that the 1 acre lots that are proposed are a nice transition between and a compromise between the smaller lots that you see to a half mile away and the larger lots in Maury Bang. Furthermore, the cost of those larger lots in this case just does not make sense. If you go to Maury Bang, their road is gravel. That's not allowed in today's environment. This road is being required to be paved since it's accessed off a paved road. Asphalt is very expensive in this area, and large 5 acre lots, it's not conducive to do those large of lots. You just can't make a profit. They don't have that much more value compared to 1 acre lots, so we need the density to make this a profitable development for this applicant. As far as the septic goes, we do have plans to do private septic systems on these lots. There's no city sewer to this area. The 1 acre lots are for private septic. The minimum allowed for a septic system is 40,000 square feet. So we've exceeded that to allow for private septic systems within these lots. There will be no expense to the city. All of the streets and infrastructure will be paid for by this applicant. And I believe that addresses the majority of their concerns.
Just to be clear, the city is not annexing this.
Correct. This is in the ETZ. Correct. So there's no city infrastructure. It's just city zoning.
Correct. Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Jankin or Ms. Geiger, did you have any other questions regarding that? You can step forward. Just state your name, please.
My name is Ryan Upchurch. I also am a member of the same subdivision. I've got two issues. First of all, the concept of a nice transition from 1 acre to 4 to 5 acre lots. You come out and you can come out to my house and you see that I'm going to have 4 brand new neighbors in my backyard. That's a little bit hard to take. It is what it is. I've only lived there for 3 months at this point, and I, invested a lot of money in getting out of town and having a little bit of space and freedom. And then the 1 acre subdivision, until it's built, obviously I don't know, but the way that it looks now, it's pretty heartbreaking. My other issue is the easement road access that runs between my property and the property directly south of me. And I border up on the property on the west side.
Are
When
you-
the subdivision is coming into place.
Lot 11 or 12? Is that-
It's the farthest northeast lot that it will have four properties butted up against. Now, my concerns is, and I've been reassured repeatedly, nobody wants to build the road there. They're keeping the easement as an emergency access. If you were to come out to that subdivision, it is completely impassable. So no emergency vehicles could get through that easement. And my big concern is like, okay, hey, a new subdivision may come in and I may not have any say in that. But if there's ever a potential of a road coming in there, that devalues my property completely. You don't move out of town and purchase a home at the price that I did and have your driveway butted right up to a road. And the way that my property was built is there's an oil pipeline that goes right through there. My property, my house had to be built where it was, right up to that easement. There was no way for them to push it back. So really my biggest concern with that is that there should be no connection possibility there. And like I said, I've been reassured, oh no, nobody wants it there, nobody wants it there. There's that possibility. It's hard to go to sleep at night knowing that, hey, you know what? One day it just takes one of these meetings where that could change. Just like I have a big empty lot behind us right now, that could change. Obviously with the decisions that are made at this meeting, I could all of a sudden have 4 adjoining neighbors to my property plus across the street from there. We're talking about, that transition from 1 acre to 4 acre. That's not a very smooth transition in my eyes. If it was the 2 to 3 acre lot, and I was told when I bought my home, hey, we're looking at 2 acre lots back there. So, like I said, there was a lot of misdirection given to me when making this purchase. So, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question
Mr.
for Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Dukert, Mr. Upchurch, she has one question.
I have a question for you. Who told you they would be made into 2 acre lots?
It was a discussion between realtors and myself. So, and that was just, I don't think I was intentionally misled. It's just the information that my wife and I were given when we purchased our property. It changed over time. So, and the farther we got into escrow, the more information we knew. So,
Okay, and by looking at this, Mr. Hadley, I mean, that road on the Moorebank side has been platted previously when that subdivision,
That's correct.
was that the county that did that? Dean, do you guys remember? Or was that a county? I don't remember this ever coming through when I was here anyway, but.
can I point out one more thing?
Yep.
As far as the 2 points of access in the subdivisions has been extremely inconsistent with the city and the county. And I was also told that the future acre subdivision would eventually try to connect to State Avenue. And that's one of those things where, well, there would be their 2 points of access right there. So I feel that the argument that is a necessity, I can point out multiple subdivisions in the area that was not adhered to.
I think as for public safety, there's a lot amount, correct? In our zoning
There's a
zone?
distance amount, yes. I believe it's about 1,300 feet. I think we have fire here that can address that as well.
Frederick, if I
Yeah.
can jump on here. Part of the request with this is following county zoning ordinance 7.11 that also states where it is not shown on the development plan, the arrangement of streets in a subdivision shall either provide for the continuation or appropriate projection of existing streets in surrounding areas or conform to a plan approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission to meet a particular situation. So that is where staff followed that recommendation to make that connection to the existing Maury Bang right away.
Okay. All right, thank you, Ms. Marshak.
And Mr. Chairman, if I just clarify for the commission and then also the public, this hearing, the first item is a zone change that allows that land to be developed in the RR zone. So a lot of the discussion that we're having pertains to the subdivision itself and the improvement of it, just to clarify that.
Thank you, Mr. Hadley. Okay. Mr. Schrank?
Thank you, Commissioners. I just wanted to respond to a couple of those concerns here once again. As far as the concern with 1 acre lots, if you look at the city's zoning designations, we really go from ag to rural residential. There's nothing really in between that has 5-acre minimums. So as far as this zone change request goes, this is the least dense that we can get without going into an agricultural designation. So we can discuss the size further in the plat discussion, but for the zone change request, if we don't go to rural residential, there's not really anything in between those two. Again, as far as the road goes, we can talk about that further. We do share some of those concerns that this adjacent owner brought up, but we can get into that more as we move into the plat discussion. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Schrank. Yes, Ms. Geiger?
For as far as it being profitable, I understand that that's what they're trying to do, is that they're trying to make more money off of the lots. But also, at the same time, our lots are also very desirable for the fact that they are larger lots. And each time that we have sold, every house has sold for more and more and more money as they have gone along. So I guess and agricultural, that was one of the reasons that I bought out there, is because we're allowed to have horses, we're allowed to have chickens, we're allowed to have farm animals, any of the farm animals within that limit. It does make it desirable. So I guess I don't see where it not being profitable. It is more profitable, I'm sure, if you do 1-acre lots. You can sell a lot more. But also the 5-acre lots are also desirable. Because our subdivision is a very desirable subdivision. Those houses, when they come on the market, are sold probably within 30 minutes of them showing and being on the market. So I feel they're just as profitable.
Thank you, Ms. Geiger.
Thank you.
Okay.
Leon Cater.
Morning, Mr. Cater.
Morning. So the transition thing I have a little bit of trouble with, because if you look at your map, I have the 6 acres in the southeast corner of that 40 acres. So we're going to go from 6 to 1 to 4 to 5. And, you know, I'm not totally against the subdivision. I don't have a problem with the 4 to 5 acre lots as well, but the way it looks now, you know, we sold where we were at and moved out there just 4 months ago for the space and to have the area, and now we're going to have 26 new neighbors, you know, in no time flat if that's how it goes. So I guess, you know, and to be honest with you, the applicant has already proven to be not so neighborly because of the fact that I've asked for over 2 months for them to spray that field. I had my property all cleaned up and has now been overrun by weeds again, and everything's moving from over there. So I guess I have some issues with that as well, but that's between me and them.
So you're in the southeast corner of that property?
I got the 6 acres there in the southeast corner.
The Tormashy subdivision, I'm assuming?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Cater. One more time, anyone in the public or online that has any comments or concerns regarding this rezoning request for the Acre subdivision, please step forward. Seeing no one or hearing no one, we will close the public hearing. Commissioners, any comments or concerns, or what are your wishes?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I can make some comments. I know that the 5-acre tracts do sell quickly, since I'm a realtor. The 1-acre tracts are more desirable because they're less expensive. And I know people like to be out of the city with the 1-acre tracts as well. So it's a catch-22. And for the developer, it costs a lot more money to, I know because I have 38 acres, and for the price that you pay for the land, you almost have to go with 1-acre tracts to either break even or even make a small profit.
Well, just a reminder, I guess, this first part is just the rezoning request from ag to rural residential. The plat would be the next item where we can talk about lot sizes and access and a little bit farther. So I guess if any commissioner, I would look for a motion one way or the other on the rezoning request, and then we can dig into the plat on the next item.
I'll make the motion to Planning and Zoning Commission to recommend approval of REZ 007-21 for the 34 acres identified in this request in the southwest quarter of Section 20, Township 140 North, Range 96 West, 5th Prime Meridian along 34th Street Southwest, as meeting the requirements of Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of the public general health, safety, and welfare.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, we'll move into item 2. This is the final plat. This is to consider a preliminary/final plat FLP-008-21, the acre subdivision located in the southwest quarter of Section 20, Township 140 North, Range 96 West of the 5th Principal Meridian along 34th Street Southwest, City of Dickinson, ETZ, Stark County, North Dakota. The request includes 26 proposed lots on a 34-acre parcel. Mr. Hadley, do you have any
Thank you, Mr.
opening
Chairman.
comments? Yep.
Yes, as you just said, this plat is a final plat for the rezone that you just heard. It's for the 34-acre parcel and 26 units. This would be the time to talk about those issues. I think Mr. Schrank did do a good job of explaining the fact that they can get septic approval. They are planning to do rural water. If not, they are eligible to do wells on that particular portion of the ETZ, of course. They won't be receiving city water, and they won't be annexed into the city. Public roads are being proposed, paved public roads that have been approved by Stark County. And as to address the weed concern from the one resident, one of the requirements on all of our plats is that the county weed control office inspect the site, and if there is any weeds, then they are required to adhere to their requirements to eradicate those. So,
Just one point
Yes.
of clarification. It'll be built to public road specs, but it's a private road.
it'll be built to county road spec.
But it's a private road.
I believe
It will
that,
not be a public road.
right.
So we won't be,
We won't be doing
the
it.
county or us
It's
will not
between the
be.
county. If the
Yeah.
county wants to accept it as a county road, they will accept it and move forward. So the city will not be involved in that roadway.
Okay.
And it's built to the county specs, not the city specs.
County specs. All right. Thank you, Mr. Hadley.
Just one more comment to that,
Yes.
Commissioners, is that they are dedicating public right-of-way, so it'll be essentially a road that subdivision maintains like a private road, but it will be located in public right-of-way.
So if there would be ever future annexation requests,
That right-of-way would
Is
always
there.
be existing.
Yeah.
okay.
And
Good
just
point.
another comment, on Monday, we received a revised drawing that includes the pipeline easement that Mr. Upchurch referenced going across his property, and also a non-access easement along the Tormashy minor subdivision. And I don't see that in my packet, so I'm not sure if that is something that was, if it showed up in your packet.
It's not on mine.
We'll see if we can get that to you here.
Okay.
But those were the two changes on the plat we received on Monday.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Marshak. We will let the applicant make comments before we open the public hearing.
Thank you, Commissioners. Again, Andrew Schrank with Highlands Engineering. As indicated, the plan is to subdivide this property into 26 1-acre, or just over 1-acre residential lots. There'll be access from a proposed north-south central road that'll run through the middle of this development. There's a cul-de-sac for emergency turnaround and vehicle turnaround, kind of in the north central portion of that road. And we've also provided a future connection to the east that could run out about a half mile to connect to State Avenue to provide a second access point if further lots are developed in the future. To answer the question on when that's required, International Fire Code indicates that once you have more than 30 residences, you need to have a second access point. So we do currently fall under that requirement. We do have the cul-de-sac that meets emergency vehicle turnaround requirements, but once you hit 30, that's when the second access point is required. Staff has requested a second connection, and I'm not sure which version of the plat you guys have. In the latest version, we have added the connection to Maury Bang at the request of staff. So there is a right-of-way that goes to the west through this development as well on our current version of the plat. Our preference would be not to make this connection. As indicated, the neighbors have concerns with this connection. We don't feel that it benefits our development at all. It's not clear who would build this road, when this road would be built. It was indicated that we would provide the right-of-way, but we would not be required to build the road. So we see this being similar to what's provided in Maury Bang. It's going to be an 80-foot strip of land that's left unmaintained, barren, undeveloped, and we don't foresee that road ever coming through. If it does get built, we also have concerns with that. The Maury Bang roads are all gravel. This developer plans to pave these roads. As you indicated, this is a public road, but the county standard says that they will not maintain this road. These homeowners are going to be responsible for snow removal and maintenance on the Acres subdivision road. Now we have a paved road next to a gravel road. The Maury Bang homeowners are likely going to plan to come through and use a nice paved road versus driving their gravel. That's going to track gravel through, and now the Acres HOA is going to be responsible for maintaining that and keeping that clean. That creates maintenance issues that we don't feel are necessary. So if it's agreed, we'd love to see that connection be removed from the plat. Like I said, I'm not sure which version you have, but there was a version submitted without that right-of-way. We've also submitted a version with that right-of-way added at the request of staff. So we ask for consideration of both of those, with our preference being no right-of-way. As staff indicated, we did add the pipeline easement for an existing gas pipeline that runs through this development. So that's, excuse me, clearly portrayed to future owners. We also added a non-access line along the Tormashi Minor subdivision in the southeast corner of the plat. The reason for this, again, stems back to this is a public road. People can access it. It's public right-of-way. However, this developer is paying a significant amount of money to pave that road and construct that road. The owner of Tormashi Minor subdivision could turn around as soon as this infrastructure is put in, subdivide that, have no infrastructure cost, and sell potentially 4 or 5 lots, access off of this road, have no responsibility in the maintenance, have no responsibility in the infrastructure. Based on our estimates, half of the infrastructure along that 900-foot lot is over $100,000. So that gives you an idea of how much this infrastructure costs per foot. So our idea is that this non-access line would remain in place until an agreement could be reached with that owner if he decides to develop in the future and wants access from this road between the applicant here and him on an agreement for maintenance and his share of the infrastructure that are being put in. And it's not just the road. This developer's putting in water mains, he's putting in electricity, he's putting in communication lines, he's putting in all that infrastructure that are now much more easily accessible to that development if they decide to subdivide. We reviewed the staff conditions and have no issues with those staff conditions. And I guess just to address one other issue of the 1 acre size, we've talked a lot about how valuable 5 acre lots are. We agree that there is some added value, but if we imagine that a 1 acre lot sells today for that $60,000 to $80,000 range, I highly doubt you're getting 5 times that, $300,000 to $400,000 for a 5 acre lot. It's not 5 times the value, but there's 5 times the street frontage, which is where our costs are. So if you look at the cost, it's along that road. We have 5 times the frontage. We just can't recoup the cost that we have with a 5 acre lot. It doesn't make sense. With that, I'd open up to any questions you may have for me.
Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Schrank?
Mr. Schrank, you were talking about right away, it's 80 foot to the north-south road, but on the south it's 75, right? You said it's 80 and,
The 75 on the south is half of that road, so that's a section line road. So that is previously, that matches what was provided by Moribang and Tormashi Minor Subdivision on the east and west side of this development. But that would just be half of the future 40th Street, what's currently 34th Street.
okay.
And that road is already in place.
Any other questions for Mr. Schrank?
Well, regarding that weeds, I think it was Ryan Upchurch, or was it Leon?
It was Mr.
I
Cater.
see it's on here, you'll obtain a weed inspection from Stark County. Have you done that already?
We have not, that I'm aware of. I assume you haven't. And that would be prior to site grading. So once we get ready to do the site grading, they would have that inspection done before they move any soils on site.
Okay. I know it's real irritating if you spraying and the next person is, and you get all their dandelions or creeping Jenny or whatever. So.
Yes, understood. And this applicant has not owned this property for very long. They just closed maybe a couple months ago. So I assume they're working through that and would be willing to get this sprayed. It just takes a bit of time to get that coordinated and get that done.
Any other questions before we open the public hearing? Thank you, Mr. Schrank.
Thank you.
All right. At this time, we will open the public hearing regarding the final plat for the acre subdivision. If anybody in the audience or online wants to call in to 701-456-7006 to ask any questions or have any concerns regarding the final plat request for the acre subdivision, please step forward.
Leon Cater. Say, I want to make sure, I guess, they're saying that they're not sure you got the final plat or you got the right one or what. I'd like to make sure that I've seen the final one because I want to know exactly where that road is, if that's changed or if it's still running up the west side of my property.
What we have, I don't believe that's changed, right? The only one that we might not have is the west road access.
This is the road here.
That is not changed.
Okay,
The only change was here.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience or online have any comments or concerns regarding the final plat for the acre subdivision? Please step forward. Hearing or seeing none, we will close the public hearing. Commissioners, what are your wishes?
This one's a little complex here, and I have some concerns. But I do feel a 1 acre lot is a legitimate transformation, and our job on the planning and zoning is to help ensure organized, structured growth for the city, and, you know, we're not always going to make everybody happy, and to me, a 1 acre lot is a good transition, and it looks like they've done everything right on their end. What if we don't approve this and they eventually put 5 acre lots here? When something goes to the east, how now they come in and say, no, we don't want 1 acre lots on this next to the east of us. What do we do then? I mean, it is in the ETZ.
I have to agree with you, Mr. Karski. All the time I've spent on this board, I've had a lot of residents come in that, you know, they bought a bigger lot they thought was out of town, and all of a sudden somebody's developing next to them, and they've never thought that would ever happen. Well, fortunately, that happens. I mean, people have the right to develop their land the way they see fit, you know, as long as it fits in with, you know, our rules and regulations. So it's tough to use that argument that I never thought I'd have 5 neighbors. Well, there's a chance this could have been annexed at one time, and this could be a 60 lot subdivision instead of 22. You know, so although I understand everybody's concerns that they don't want that density. I mean, I think it could be worse, to be honest with you. Being this close to the city limits, I mean, at some point, it wouldn't be unheard of that this could would be annexed at some point if the city continues to grow, so, you know, and we can provide services to it, so.
Mr. Chair. To Mr. Schrank's point of the staff recommendation for the road, on the map that we don't have, the access road that they have to set aside easement for, that's probably never going to get built. I think that should also be a consideration in your final approval. We approve these roads to nowhere sometimes, and they just sit there, just much like the subdivision beside them. They have an easement that goes to nowhere that's going to go into the back of 4 lots. That's probably never going to get built. And the concern, who's going to maintain it? We've seen this before. Who's going to maintain this? I think that's something you guys should consider too if you're going to approve this final plat, granting that easement, because initially we're going to be getting the calls, or the county commissioners are going to be getting the calls that this is unmaintained. So I think that should be a consideration also in the approval of this final plat.
Thank you, Mr. Decker.
Which that road does not show on our map, correct?
No. So the preference would be not. Let's hear what city staff has to say about this road connection to Moribang.
Commissioners, because of the existing right-of-way that's given in Moribang and following county zoning, that is why the connection was requested by this applicant to include in the acres. So it does make a connected route. And at some point, as we grow and things develop, it could be something that we'd want to install at a later date. We don't always know what that future plan looks like, but when they platted Moribang, there was a reason for them to add that extension, and so following county zoning, we met that with a connection in the acre subdivision. That was where our request came from, for them to add that connection.
Thank you, Ms. Marshak. Mr. Franchuk? You're the county guy.
Where exactly are you talking about this road? If it's not on our map.
I would be right here. Towards the northeast there.
Yeah, this is existing.
I wasn't involved at all with the Moribang thing that I recall. And do you remember, Mr. Joseph, when that was done, or the Moribang when was that done? That we put that easement in there? You have any recall it? I believe it's before I was on, because I do not recall that.
Commissioners, the Moribang subdivision was in existence. I came here in 2012, and it was in existence prior to that.
Yeah, because I don't recall this, and why they put an easement in there that at an angle. I don't know. I have no idea why they did that.
I mean, for me, the only advantage I see to it is if, for some reason, the city would grow and annex that property into the city at some point down the road. And we would want probably some sort of connection between those two subdivisions. But right now, I see no real benefit to it.
Commissioner, if I could just clarify one thing, the extension that they have that faces to the east heading towards State Avenue follows along those same lines. So as you said, your guys' job is to look at the future of where we're going at some point in time, if the city grows and there is a connection all the way to State Avenue, then it truly then probably would make sense as far as looking at the connectivity from State Avenue all the way through the backside of whatever those developments are that are to come, and then these two developments that bring you back down to 34th. So that's really the intent. We're presuming that development's going to happen in the same type of fashion up there, and that's a hard thing to guide. As Mr. Karski said, we could go to a 5-acre lot subdivision just east of there, or it could be annexed and we provide city services and there could be 52 lots in there. So at this point, depending on where we're going, it's probably going to be a residential development. We know that. And we're trying to guide the connectivity of those developments in the future to what we have today. And I believe the Maury Bang, just off the top of my head, I think the owners that have lived there for quite some time probably could address that more, but I want to say it was 2008 or 9. 9? Okay.
So, Mr. Hadley, in your expert opinion, would you recommend approving it with the road if we're going to approve this?
I think for good planning, I mean, we have a number of subdivisions that have been done in the past that we have approved roads that didn't get built, and I believe that the better scenario would be to approve developments and have them build roads, put them in, have them done, not have dead-end roads or dead-end dirt trails that don't do us any good. And so I agree with Mr. Decker from the standpoint of we have a number of those developments throughout town where now we've had to go back in and put those in. So I think at the time the development comes in that we should put those roads in if we feel they're necessary. So if that connectivity between the subdivisions is important, that road should be put in. On the Maury Bang side, that might be something that happens if we feel it's an important thing, then working with the county, that might be something that we can get done. So it's more of a emergency access, secondary in and out, ingress and egress for those property owners, not just in Maury Bang, but also in this development, if that primary access gets cut off of 34th. So it is a tough decision at this point, just because it appears that it goes nowhere and it doesn't provide a great service. But there is a reason that we plan for that service, and that's why when the engineering department started working through that, that's why they suggest that connectivity, because they can see, they're looking down the road to make sure that those roadways connect in an orderly fashion and that they're actually built, which is something that we're doing now, that we're ensuring that the roads that we actually approve in these plats are actually getting built. They're on the ground. They're asphalt and completed rather than just drawn on a map. So it is a rather important decision in that, it is going to determine what's going to be on the ground.
The only concern is who's going to build it? I mean, are we going to build a short paved section to the end of the property line and then there it sits?
Mr. Chairman, we do have a few developments that Lyons is one, or we've got platted roadways and at properties that could be developed up to the northeast of town that right now go nowhere. Cook's Addition. We've got Cook's Addition up there, just kitty corner and in the city limits. We have dead-end roads that go nowhere at this point. So, I mean, it is kind of a result of having development and then planning ahead that this development's going to move forward. This particular street's going to continue on through this field at some point in time. So it is something that we look at on a regular basis, and we have done. And you look at Cook's Addition as a perfect example, because there's probably 4 or 5 at least dead-end roads that on paper continue and will, when they're final platted, they will continue and go through that property.
I mean, my biggest concern with this is, you can come up, Mr. Schrank, is they paved to the end of their property line. So we require them to do that today. What happens here, this turns into a trail till you get to the pavement, and then they go burning out of there on the paved road.
I agree that's an issue, and it's, like I said, it's something that probably we need to work with the county, Mr. Heiser at the county, and figure out if it's something that we feel is an important connection, then that connection should be put into whatever the county would require as far as that connection and standards.
Okay, Mr. Frank.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, just a couple of our questions that, if this is going to be required, that we'd like addressed is, who would build this roadway? Is it going to be a requirement of these developments? Is it the county? Is it the city? Who's going to pay for that cost? Is it assessed? Is it strictly built by those municipalities? How is the maintenance going to be handled? And what's going to trigger this construction? If it's not necessary today, what's going to happen 50 years down the road that's going to say, we need this connection? If we're going to be required to provide this, I guess we'd just like to understand some of those items better so we can make a better informed decision here too. Thank you.
We're trying to understand it also.
I'd like to add one more thing on that
Yep.
existing road as well. Is if we're talking about future development and potential annexation of the Moribang subdivision, now how much of a cost would that cost the city to bring it up to city codes? We're talking, we are an unpaved subdivision that has no more room to grow as far as connecting to another subdivision. There's no more lots available. So in order to have this road completed, I see zero value of the city as far as adding that to, because like I said, if you actually went out there and saw the steepness and the slope, there's a lot of grading that would need to be done. We're talking tree removal, you name it. I do not see a benefit in any way, shape, or form.
I'm with you at this point, Mr. Upchurch. I agree. It's just the future planning. You know, we don't know how this area north will develop in the future. You know. Sure. Ms. Geiger.
He commented on the fact that they're going to be maintaining it, and for us to go from our subdivision to his subdivision, bringing the gravel in, more maintenance for them, what's stopping them from going from their subdivision to ours? And ours is a private road. Ours is not maintained by the county or the city.
Theirs is private also, and it will not be maintained by the city or the county.
But they're going to have access to our road that is private, that we maintain that as homeowners. Correct?
And their homeowners association will maintain theirs also.
Yeah, but theirs is going to be paved.
Yeah.
They're talking about they're concerned about us going from a paved road or from a gravel road to a paved road. We're also concerned about their people going from their paved road through our subdivision on our gravel road.
I'm totally with you. It goes both
Yeah.
ways. But they're both private roads, just so we're clear on that.
I know, but I'm just saying, if
You're going to maintain
connect-
yours, and that's their concern, and that's your concern.
Yes.
They're saying, you guys, if they put this road connection in, some of your people might go through theirs, and some of their people might go through yours. So how's that maintenance issue
Right.
going to be
Right.
resolved? I agree.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, it's pretty obvious either party does not want a connecting road, I don't believe there, and to us, is it going to be beneficial for us in the long run? I'm not sure of that right now.
I'm not sure either. The only issue is if we don't address it at this point, there'll never be a chance for a road there because
Right.
there would be nothing.
I guess I have a question, Mr. Chairman. Mayor Decker, how did you want us to state this?
My concern is that we grant these easements. These roads are left like some of the roads in town. They're not even required to be put in. We're dealing with one on the south side of town right now that was platted, never required to put in, and now there's future development going on, and people are asking for this road, so who's going to put it in? Who pays for it? To Mr. Schrank's point, If we grant this easement right now, my biggest concern is we have HOAs, right, that are supposed to take care of these easements, and they don't. Then we get calls from the residents, noxious weeds, it's unsightly. Who's going to maintain this? Is it the county? Is it the city? Either we make them put it in, or we don't grant the easement. There's no road. And to the neighbors to the west, to the counties, if they would not require that, then and grant that property back to the adjacent landowners, then that pretty much shuts it off, and it's a private drive forever.
Have the easement vacated on that side.
Right. The county vacates that easement over in Bangs, then it's a private drive.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Decker. Anyone else have any thoughts?
So I made a motion that,
I
Mr.
would
Cater?
like to ask the applicant if, what their plans are for the west, or for the east side of their road coming in there, which will border the west side of my property. I mean, they're gonna put the road in there, is there gonna be a fence, is there gonna be, what's gonna be along that fence, is there, to divide my property from yours?
Mr. Schrank?
That road would be built per county standards, so really the only separation would be the ditch line in there. We'd build an 8-foot flat bottom ditch, 3 feet deep. That would provide that separation between those two properties. At this time, there's no plans to put a fence or any other separation along that boundary.
That ditch would be in the right-of-way.
In the right-of-way, correct.
Yep.
We would not
So
be
it would be on-
getting into the Tormashi property, the Tormashi minor subdivision. It would all be built within the right-of-way,
Yep.
correct.
Thank you. All right, commissioners, what are your wishes?
so if I make a motion and then just state that they vacate the easement? One of the
We're not gonna,
conditions?
we wouldn't require that connection.
Yeah, I'm just seeing going from 5 acres to 1 acre lots, and it's low density. The traffic is not calling for a road there, I don't believe, in my opinion. I think we can eliminate that. I don't have a problem vacating that.
I agree.
So I guess the motion would be, that we would not require that connection to the Maury Bank subdivision.
Okay. I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of FLP-008-2021, the final plot for the acre subdivision as depicted in attachment A for 26 lots total, as meeting all the requirements of the Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare, and that we do not require the connection of the road
To the Maury Bank.
to the Maury Bank subdivision.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Cordnoy. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. We will move on to item 3 on our action item agenda. This is a special use permit. This is to consider a special use permit, SUP-003-21, for explosive storage on site on a 1.3 acre 2780 East Villard Street in the industrial zone within the city of Dickinson, Stark County, North Dakota. Mr. Hadley.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As he stated, this is a explosive storage in an industrial zone. It requires a special use permit. The applicant has met all the ATF and the emergency services reviews and approval. There hasn't been any public comment on this particular item, and it was advertised. Staff would recommend approval, and I believe the applicant is here if you have any questions and if he wants to make any statements.
The applicant would like to make any comments, they could step forward right now. Good morning.
I'm Tiffany Wood Nelson. I'm one of the corporate officers for Wood Wireline.
Chris isn't able to be here. We have some guys in quarantine down in Wyoming, so he's down there helping them. I do want to let you guys know that we've been in business for 43 years. I'm third generation in wireline, so we're very familiar with the process. The regional manager up here has 20 plus years in wireline. We previously owned a wireline company in Dickinson from 1981 to 2011 when my parents and their partner sold. So we're not a fly-by-night company. We want to be a part of this community, and we have an impeccable safety record, so we feel that this is just the next process to get going up here.
Okay. And you're okay with all the requirements that have been following conditions? There's 5 conditions I see on our staff report. Obviously, you've met some of them already, it sounds like.
Yes.
Okay. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Ms. Nelson? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
These special use permits, just a reminder, run annually. They're renewed annually, right, Mr.?
They're reviewed annually, yes,
Okay. And this would be a
by
public...
staff,
By
unless,
staff.
unless required by the commission. And
Or if there's a complaint-driven issue, yeah. Okay, and this would be a public hearing, I believe, on this.
Yes.
So we will open the public hearing regarding the special use permit, SUP-003-21 for explosive storage at 2780 East Villard. If anybody in the audience or online has any questions or concerns regarding this special use permit, please step forward and state your questions or concerns. You can also call into 456-7006. One more time, if anybody has any questions or concerns regarding special use permit SUP-003-21, please step forward. Seeing or hearing none, we will close the public hearing. Commissioners, what are your wishes?
I move the City of Dickinson Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of the petition for a special use permit, SUP-003-21, for on-site explosive storage, subject to the conditions listed above, as meeting all the requirements of the City of Dickinson Municipal Code and also being in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare.
We have a motion. Do we have a second to this?
I'll second.
Mr. Bush, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right. We will move on, I believe, to the hot topic of the day. Everybody, anybody in the audience that would like, that county commissioners or commissioners, I think we have some chairs for you guys for this discussion. You're welcome to come forward and grab a seat. That's you, Bernie. Yes. Okay.
Jason,
We have some technical issues.
so any of our commission,
Any of our... We're good? Okay. All right. We will move on to our next item on the agenda this morning. This is the joint zoning transitional meeting. This is to consider the Stark County zoned parcels to be transitioned into the City of Dickinson zoning districts, to take into consideration the surrounding area and the existing users per state of North Dakota Century Code 40-47-01.1 extraterritorial zoning. I think the process is we're going to have some open discussion.
Yes, Commissioner
Swinko?
Frederick, Chairman. Just want to begin by a couple comments here just to kind of get the process started. First, the city wants to welcome the citizens as well as the Stark County representatives to the meeting here today. By statute, the purpose of the zoning transition meeting is to review existing zoning rules, regulations, and restrictions currently in place in the territory to be extraterritorial zoned and to be planned for the orderly transition. I hope that it's the goal of the city as well as the county to plan for the continued growth and expansion of this community. And as we start here this morning, I just want to clarify a few points for the committee members and most certainly for the public. There has been some confusion, I would say, with regard to the difference between expanding the extraterritorial zone and annexing. The process that we're going through right now is not annexation. By statute, the extraterritorial zone extends from the city's corporate city limits. So for those of you that have a map in front of you, and for those of you in the room, if you look at the map on the wall over here, the corporate city limits in the city of Dickinson are not changing. So for those of you that are currently in the ETZ, as it stands right now, you're not being annexed into the city. That's not what this is. That's not this process. So I just want to make sure that that is available and understood for everybody for here that might have concerns about that. Furthermore, just for, again, a baseline understanding, the map that you see on the wall over there, that is the current city limits, and then what you see in yellow are actually areas within that 2-mile ETZ that the city has not taken jurisdiction over. So although it is in the it's in the 2-mile ETZ currently, the city turns that regulation over to the county. So we are having that situation occur currently. Secondly, just for points of clarification, by statute, the city and the county may enter into an agreement to identify certain responsibilities and regulations within the additional 2-mile ETZ. It is my recommendation to the city and the county this morning that we sit down here and we have an open and productive dialogue about discussing that additional 2-mile ETZ. And it would seem to me that the best course of action this morning for the city and the county is to identify particular areas of concern for both the city and the county, and to designate which of those areas would become under jurisdiction of the city within the ETZ and which of those areas may remain with the county. And in doing that, we could have, again, a joint agreement that would state these particular areas. In discussions with city staff, the city's high priority areas are the airport, it's Patterson Lake, and getting that squared away and up to regulation. And just for those of you that are here with regard to certain issues, I just want to make it very clear that the city, in discussion with city staff, the city has no desire to take over the regulation or the authority with regard to the application involving Marathon and its wind towers. It's the city's position that in the agreement, in the event the city reaches an agreement with the county as far as the joint jurisdictional issues, that the authority with regard to that situation remain with the county. The county has obviously vested quite a bit of time into that issue. The county has knowledge of that issue, and it's just something that the city feels it would be prudent that it stay with the county. So what I envision this morning is the city, again, sit down, we identify particular areas, and within that agreement, we can address what those particular areas look like. There is also a possibility this morning that this group could designate a subcommittee to sit down in a smaller setting to really hammer out and identify which of those areas, again, would be beneficial to have county jurisdiction and which of those may have city jurisdiction, and then bring a recommendation back to this group for purposes of further discussion. So with that being said, I think the best course of action is to hear from the county, hear from the city, and kind of get that dialogue going, and hopefully we can have a very productive discussion this morning.
Mr. Chairman, if I could jump in real quick.
Sure, Mr. Head.
Thank you, Christina. That was a great update. In front of you, all of our guests here have large-scale maps that show the ETZ, and there's markers there. And so as we're having discussions, this is kind of a discussion work process. Please add notes, make marks on it, whatever, and we'll take that and move forward on where we're going to go forward on this project. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hadley. As for I think we're going to try to have our discussion first, and if there's any public comments, we will wait till after that discussion, and then I'll allow anybody that has any public comments to come up. Being that there's a large group here, if we can keep them as brief as possible, just state your questions or concerns, we'll try to get you an answer. I mean, if everybody has a question, this could take a long time, so let's try to keep it as brief as possible, please. So with that, we will begin the discussion, so.
Well, I guess I would have a question right away.
Hey, Mr. Marsh?
Attorney Marsh. So how does this affect the farmers that are in these areas? That if this zoning process goes out there and you have 76 square miles or whatever it is that's being added, there's a lot of farmers that are out there. How is that going to affect whatever it is that they may or want to do with their building or whatever the heck that they need to do?
Mr. Hadley, or?
Yes, Mr. Marsh, just to address that, we do have a number of farming community or properties in our ETZ right now, and it doesn't preclude them from operating farming. We actually encourage that. It's actually, North Dakota's #1 industry, so we definitely don't want to prohibit that. The zoning would be complementary, in my opinion, to what the county has, which would be agriculture. And the only major change is a couple of uses that we allow that the county wouldn't allow, that would give some opportunities for those landowners, but then they also could divide their property down to a 5-acre parcel in the agricultural zone if they wanted family, kids, whatever, to come back home and live on the farmstead. So those, in a nutshell, that we definitely support the agricultural community.
But if they would want to be building a building or something like that, is that going to affect any different type of zoning as far as what they have? I know we work with you guys now on zoning and permits. Is that going to be any difference to them once this is in the ETZ zone?
Really, the building department, for the building department itself, or whether it be for Stark County Rural or in the ETZ or in the city, it's the same department, so that would be directed the same as it is currently.
But it wouldn't change any of their...
No.
Mr. Schwint, do you want to come up and just make a quick comment?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Leonard Schwint, Billing Official for the City of Dickinson and Stark County. The current MOU would still stay the same. So as far as permitting, it'd be the same process.
And is these farms that are 40-plus acres, is there some exclusion there?
Well, there would be exclusion per the state statute. If you're farming over 40 acres, deriving more than 50% of your income from the land, you're exempt from building permits.
That was my main concern.
Okay, that would not change. That's a state statute. Thank you, Mr. Schwinn.
Yep. Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Messer.
Neil Messer, Stark County Commissioner. First of all, thanks for inviting us to participate in this. Look forward to working with the city in moving this forward. I think there's so many items that we can work together, and it's a lot easier and a lot more productive if we do this jointly rather than try to do it separately. As Ms. Wanko stated, the statute of the ETZ is to ensure orderly development, and from the county commission side, we want orderly development. The city side wants orderly development. To parcel, I believe also, and Christina, you could correct me, that these ETZ lines could be down to 40-acre quarter of quarter when they're identified typically. And so I would strongly agree and encourage us to put a working group together so that we can represent the interests of city, P&Z, and the county, so that we can kind of identify those, because this could be a cumbersome process if we did it publicly, because some person's 40 acres would be identified differently than the other one. So my comment is I'd strongly encourage us to appoint a committee, the city appoints individuals, Chairman Franchuk with the commission, county commission appoints some individuals, and at least make the initial recommendation, of which your committee could certainly modify and move forward to the city commission at some point.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Master. Is there anyone else that has any comments?
I agree with what Mr. Messer says about the committee on that. Also, you know, you're talking about it taking over the airport and the lake on there. What benefits would the city have of that?
Dr. Mr. Winningham.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. It's listening in. Brian Winningham, the city administrator. From a development standpoint, it's not something that we're too concerned with from development standpoint as far as the airport and the Patterson Lake. There is a number of federal monies that is being allocated and legislated, it seems like daily, but that are infrastructure related, that are Clean Water Act related, and that really would benefit the community as a whole. One of the issues with Patterson Lake is the inability to control toxic algae. And so there's been some studies in the past done about how that would be beneficial to potentially dredge, to potentially look through and determine the kill depth, and to try to get Patterson Lake to be a world-class recreational area for this area. Primarily, not, you know, as a recreational lake, that's the secondary use of it. The primary use would be the emergency water source for this area, which, if something were to happen with Southwest Water, we would draw water from Patterson as it was in the past. There's some complicated issues when it comes to Patterson Lake. It is a navigable water of the U.S. Therefore, there's a large process to go through. The Corps of Engineers holds the permit application. The Bureau of Reclamation controls the water. And, of course, state and county and local have to work together in order to look at the use of that lake and future use of that lake. So this body, as we're sitting here today, can be very effective when we look at what we like Patterson Lake to look at. As the ETZ extends, it gives the city the ability to go forward and do applications for the grants. There are multiple clean water grants. There are multiple water use grants that we want to seek as a city. We could either petition the county to go through these grant process, but most of these are time sensitive. They demand attention, 100% attention from city staff in order to maintain these applications for these grants. And it's a fast-moving target. Recently, within our current North Dakota legislation, we saw the governor offer a very large package of money, which is called the American Rescue Plan Act. That, effectively known as ARPA dollars, is federal dollars that the U.S. government has already taken from us and wants to distribute it to the states. The state of North Dakota now has that, and we would like that money to go into this community. One of those things we'd like to do is offer a project for Patterson Lake to do dredging, to also consider the study of that water source, and to potentially look at it as a recreation area and our secondary water source. For the airport, if you look at what our consideration for that is, there's been a number of projects on the table that would require us, or at least to look at, extending our sewer and water down to the airport for use, for growth. We would be able to do that under certain federal grants, and there's a lot of bureaucracy involved in this, but essentially we could draw on those grants, receive that money, and build out certain infrastructure, as we have in the past with our infrastructure in the city of Dickinson. One of the issues would be, as we go through the complex workings of grants, there are federal strings always tied to those grants. For airports, you have security considerations, you have TSA considerations, and FAA considerations that potentially would prevent us from tapping into those water lines or conduits, even if they're a 4-inch conduit going out to the airport, that would prohibit us from putting curb stops along those routes. So if somebody wanted to eventually tap into the city water source. I can't explain why that happens, but I can imagine that it's typically for conduit access where you can crawl through and some of the security considerations. So they make a blanket statement. We'd have to go through all that process. During this ETZ expansion, we then have the planning authority to essentially sign off through our city commission body, through the planning and zoning body, to apply for those grants. And that's the biggest consideration, at least in my mind and staff's mind, of how when we proceed, we look at these major projects. And the primary reason would be to get those federal dollars back to our city and our surrounding area. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
And then just a reminder that, Dickinson Parks and Rec now owns all the land around the lake, correct, Mr. Karski?
Yes, we do approximately 1,700 acres.
So that would pull that in. Not only that, we are working on a major expansion of our Crooked Crane Trail out, from the city all the way out to the lake, which would be add to the recreation area out there. So cleaning that area up would be, a major benefit and one of our top concerns, I guess, so, before we make that investment. Anyone else have any questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Ms. Kuntz.
Sandra Kuntz with Planning and Zoning for Stark County. One of my questions back to the city administrator is why would we not want to seek those grants on behalf of the county and keep those funds available countywide as opposed to driving them exclusively within the city?
I'm not sure of the process with the county for your ability to apply for grants. Most of the grants that are happening through ARPA tend to be what is it either considered non-entitled units of the government or entitled units. The city is a non-entitled unit, so we are under 50,000. So we have to really fight for this money back through the state often. As you saw with the county received the American Rescue Plan Act dollars of $6 million. Maybe that money could be used for your infrastructure development in the county areas. The city received, or is going to receive potentially $3.6 million. We received half of that. There's been no decision on where that money would go. But essentially that legislation that occurred with the American Rescue Plan Act, those dollars were to benefit, coming out of pandemic, benefit the community. So I think that the county could consider going after grants, but I don't know how likely it would be as a unit of government that the county would receive it differently. Most of the legislation has to do with municipalities and not necessarily counties. The county received their money instantly. So we, and I say instantly for the federal government, that could be months. But they received their money already. I think it was, maybe it was May of this year. And so we're waiting. We have to wait. Other cities in the state of North Dakota receive theirs if they're over 50,000. We're not one of those. So we're having to wait for Treasury legislation, for Treasury guidance, and the state is waiting for Treasury guidance for us to receive money that we could use ideally to reduce taxes, to reduce some of the burden on the citizens. So I think going back to your question, it would be good for the county to consider those grant applications. And when you do find those grants, to work with the city to see if we can partner to make a stronger voice for those grant applications. For now, the city maintains as a municipality the biggest consideration for grants because they're primarily written for municipalities. And so it's a full-time job to do grants. It is almost, you have to have one single entity that tracks the federal government's money. I mean, for everybody listening, it's an unfathomable amount of money. It's unfathomable. It takes 36,000 years to count to $1 trillion. You would have to print $30,000 a second for a year to get to $1 trillion. It's unfathomable. Federal agencies, they're not built to even hand this money out. So it's going to require partnerships within our local area. That's nonprofits, that's anybody who has the will to come forward and say, I'd like to help apply for grants. So we can get that federal dollars back here because they've already taken it from us. In fact, they've taken it from your children's children. So I am inclined to say whatever we can do to get that money back here, and if that's partnership with the county, partnership with the state or creating that organization in the city that would go after grants. That's what I think we should do. Does that answer some of it?
It does. Part of my question, though, is are we taking too much from the county residents in order to funnel it within the city when you do have access for additional grants, as opposed to those funds remaining and that land and the property taxes remaining available to the county residents, as opposed to more of the density areas within the county?
So I don't think our property tax wouldn't have anything to do with it. It is the population that matters. So that's a lot of these grants go through a very broad, I would say I call it fuzzy math, but it's essentially math that has to do with HUD, with housing and urban development. And it's very complicated. So every time you have a community development block grant, they tend to defer to what HUD sees as this community. And when I look at the data, quite frankly, we estimate about 28,000 people within the city of Dickinson. The census from 2020, which really is a lot of latency within that data, within those counting of people, that latency would suggest that we're about 28,000 if you look at our utilities. If you add that to what the U.S. Census said for Stark County, it's roughly about 6,000 extra people in the county, Dickinson being, even in the incorporated areas, the largest portion of that. So that's how the federal government views us. They view us as Stark County being about 6,000, the city of Dickinson being about, the official estimate, 25,649. That's the way the federal government views us. They count us as a city, not necessarily as a county. So it's problematic for the county because you don't have the population. So I would say that's some of the things we should fight for with our congressional representative, if that makes sense.
Yes, and I understand we are talking about ETZ and not annexation, but your comments about extending city services to the airport and taking over a bigger portion of Patterson Lake, that tells me if you're going to make that investment, then the next thing we will see for those particular areas you invest that infrastructure is an annexation. So that will be lost revenues for the county. Am I not correct?
I think your hypothetical situation could be correct, but I don't think that it's correct in our planning. I think if you see the city has spent in the last 10 years about $312 million to increase infrastructure development. So if you see our lift station going out to industrial areas nearing South Hart, we haven't annexed them. So I think that's those requests come in, and we have to make the consideration whether it's worth building infrastructure that provides revenue back to the city, and we still haven't annexed that. An example would be that we currently have a company who we sell reuse water to, and that's $1 million revenue for the city. It's also in the county, so the county receives for that one company about $3 million a year in taxes. We benefit greatly from that partnership for those industries that are willing to come here and take the risk to be entrepreneurs. But I don't think we automatically consider annexation. With annexation comes our ability to expand services, or inability if we don't have the money. So we would have to consider fire and police options. We'd have to consider then connecting residential areas with our sewer and water. And that's a larger challenge, in the hundreds of millions of dollars challenge, as we see even going out to that 2-mile extension. So I don't see that growth at about a 3% population growth per year. That's about the best study that we see within this area. In 2017, there was a 6-city study that occurred for the area and surrounding area, and that puts us right at that mark, about 3% per year growth. That's not transitory residents who come in for work temporarily and leave. That's residents that come to call this place home, and that's at about 3% a year. So we would see us going to about 30,000 in the next 2 years, and that it's really a 10-year plan. So the comprehensive plan that the city developed and went forward with in 2013 was called the Roadmap to the Future, the 2035 Roadmap to the Future. We're not there yet. If you look at the data there, it suggested that we'd be at 50,000 people right now, and we're not. And so what we do is we continue to plan with that master plan in mind. That's the North Dakota statute requires us to do a master plan. That was it. It's called the comprehensive plan. And so that would give us decision points for bodies like this to say, is this the best use of this land in the future? And as we saw earlier today in a planning and zoning, the robust public discussion for one development that included just rural residential to agriculture, I think that's important for every consideration. I think that should be mostly in the public. I think we should talk about these things mostly in the public so that there's not a powerful closed-door meeting that would suggest that somebody's benefiting. It should be everybody's benefiting or nobody's benefiting. And that is the best. But sometimes, as Commissioner or Chairman Frederick mentioned, not everybody will be happy. But you should have a reasonable explanation of why you're not happy. Is that a good answer for you?
It answers some of my questions. My main question is, if that's the rate of population expansion, why are you jumping to 4 miles as opposed to keeping with the 2? Because I think that's what this meeting is about. Before that final decision is to be made under the statute, we have to have that conversation between county needs and city needs.
That's a great question. I think as part of city planning, we want it to be perfect, but we're, humans, so it's not going to be perfect. But one of the best consideration is to create a map of a plan, create a roadmap. For the city of Dickinson, we have the comprehensive plan. And I probably say that like it's a broken record, but that's what I try to follow. And so that's what I try to offer to the commission as professional responsibility of what we're doing for the future. If you look on that comprehensive plan, which is on our website, on page 116, if you look at what the major objectives were, is future land use. So when you look at future land use, you go down to a policy that we implemented, and that's policy 1.6, that basically says when the population grows to 25,000, you should consider extending your ETZ. That's what we intend to do. That's what we're doing today. That's why we notified the county. I think when we look at how we plan for city growth, there's no way to do it except for create a roadmap, have these meetings, discuss whether we can even grow those city services. But I think that's the why. The why is it has been a plan since 2013 to do this. We're now at that moment. We waited for the federal government to tell us what our population was, when really we knew we were larger anyway. There's a provision in the North Dakota statute that allows us to do our own version of the census. We didn't want to do that because it costs money. So we waited for the census data that came out. And that was about an 18-month lag if you see how they did the census. And, they, I don't want to say blamed, but pandemic had some effect on the census. So I think what you're seeing here is the normal, and I don't say normal march, I think it's the plan that the city laid out in 2013 with public comments, with many boards and meetings, as I read the minutes of the history, that basically said, what should we do in the future? We're now at that future, and so we're going forward with these meetings, and we essentially intend to try to get it right with these types of conversations. So that's a great question.
Mr. Chairman. Oops,
I'm sorry. I don't mean to hog the meeting, but I was appointed by the governor to assist the city of Williston with this type of situation, where they had their comprehensive plan. Unfortunately, we are in different times, and have we considered whether that comprehensive plan is still accurate? Because we are no longer booming like we were in 2013. We are no longer seeing that rate of growth. We are seeing a different game plan even for the oil industry in that expansion. And those were the nature of discussions that I directed with the city of Williston and its surrounding areas when we had that intermix and this transition plan between city and county. So I don't mean to be asking questions that may seem to you to be out of line or petty. What I learned in that transition meeting and mediating those groups is we may not be doing ourselves the best service by relying on old data. And so I challenge you to consider that, is really looking at, should we be stretching ourselves so thin to go 4 miles out when the writing on the wall is our growths are not going to extend to 60,000 like we were thinking in 2013. And so I'm really challenging you to pump the brakes, so to speak, and look at our comprehensive plan. Are we jumping out into areas that are exclusively ag and now going to be adding to the burden of those areas, not only from the standpoint of now when they come forward for buildings, et cetera, and assuming they're not over the 40-acre parcel, are we going to zinging them with additional fees? Are we going to be challenging them greater in times when they're already challenged? So that's my challenge back to this board is, do we have good evidence upon which we are going 4 miles out as opposed to focusing on our 2 and filling in the gaps? Because that was the biggest challenge for Williston, is we were starting to see donut holes. And while they were looking to, accommodate the future, they missed the boat in the fact that they didn't fill in what they already had. Thank you. I don't mean to hog the meeting, but we need to have good information.
I'll just make one comment because I think it's important clarification, and I think you're spot on with your thinking on how cities look at development. I won't speak for Williston and what they've done. I do know they're have a much greater deficit in their budget. I know that they're hundreds of $1 millions in debt. We're not. I think that as far as the consideration for the city, when you look at what you said about fees and all, a lot of that is hypothetical, and I think that those are future dragons that we have to consider, but we may not have to fight today. And so I think what you're saying about correct data is vital. Is vital for the city planning, is vital for our professional staff to essentially put offers to planning and zoning and to our city commission. And quite frankly, back to the county commission, when able, reporting from the city to the county would be one of those meetings where we could consider doing that as well, and having this conversation in the public so you have more information. The city, over the last 6 months, went through a review of the comprehensive plan. We received a grant from the state of North Dakota. We went through another planning scenario where we tried to figure out from 2013, 2 revisions within the comprehensive plan, 2016, 2017, to try to get the data right. Because you can see that there are some things that are good that we know the data is not correct, and there are a number of things that help us. It would be great in anybody's life, not just a city government, but to have a 35-year plan and then look back at the moment in time where you're at. You call it event horizon. Did we get there? What did we get wrong? That's one of the things that we consider now is, what did we get wrong in that long, 2035 roadmap? Here we are in 2021. What did we get wrong? The city paid about $300,000 for that comprehensive plan. So it's no small thing for us to have to go back and say, we need to review this. It should be reviewed every year. We should have some portions of that. It's a very large document. It's worth reading. It's also worth coming forward and challenging some of the things that are in that document. The public reading that document, highlighting those things, and bringing it to city staff and saying, this is wrong. We're never going to get there. But that's what plans are. And so you have to have diversionary plans. You have to have branches and sequels of comprehensive plans. And that is the challenge of any municipal government, is to make sure that we're doing the best for the citizens. And as you see in the public forum here and what occurred in planning and zoning, this is the best place to do it. So I absolutely appreciate those comments, and I think this is the way we do things in the future. Is we sit down and we have this public conversation and then hear from the public later. And I'm sure I will. I'm sure I'll get all the phone calls, and that's great. So thank you.
Mr. Messer.
Yeah, I think it's important that the ETC, to note that the ETC statute doesn't dictate you automatically go to the full 4 miles, and I just want to make that point perfectly clear, that it's enabling legislation, not requiring legislation. The other point is that other communities in our state, some of the larger ones who have gone from the 2 to the 4, they've worked out a plan with their counties where the first 2 miles are under the sole discretion of the city, and the next 2 miles could be joint jurisdiction, as it's called. So I think we're going to get there. I think a lot of the comments you made, Mr. Winningham, are appropriate, that we need to do this together. And like I said, I don't envision the ETZ at this point going to the full 4 miles. I just don't see it. There are certain areas that you referenced that critical, essential, timing-wise, that need to be done, and that's appropriate. Some of these others, we just need to work through it. And I think there's a message that we want to work together, and I think we're going to get it done.
Thank you, Mr. Messer. Ms. Dukert, you had a comment?
I have to leave for another appointment, but I want to make a comment regarding Dickinson's growth. I think this is more about getting us some federal monies back, according to Mr. Winningham. Also, and that would benefit all of us, not just in the city of Dickinson, but the whole county. The other thing is, the county uses the city, all of our facilities, whatever, and we're happy for that. But if you're worried about your taxes are the same as ours are in Dickinson, since you got the large increase maybe 5 years ago. And I know Mr. Messer and I see that all the time as far as selling properties. There isn't really any difference between the rural taxes and the city taxes. Just to reaffirm you that they've already said it's not going to have anything to do with your taxes. So there's no guarantee that any of our taxes will go down or go up, but I don't think if that's your biggest concern, please talk about it.
Ms. Dukert, and that goes as far as fees too. I guess we're already in a joint agreement with the county to do all the building inspections and building permitting. So I believe the fee structure for both city and county are the same as of right now. So I don't know what other fees that there would be out there that would be different. In fact, in the county, you don't have the whack and sack fees that we pay in the city for hooking up to the sewer and water, which is about $5,000 a house, I believe. So, I mean, that's something that we can explore if, I don't know if the zoning application dollar amounts are different, some of that stuff, maybe. I don't believe so, but I mean, I don't know that there's any fees out there that are different right now, or that the city is much higher than the county. I would say that a building permit in the city is less, or more, excuse me, than the county.
Well, I just have to say, for governments to be successful, they do have to work together.
I totally agree. And
so, I guess if Neil's plan works out here, where part of it is run by you and part of it by us, or together, however it works, but we do have to work together on this. I think it's too much for one entity.
And I agree with that. And I believe that the city's got their eyes on certain areas that they see future growth in. Like, we're not going to expand in every direction, more than likely, but I mean, this isn't probably a planning session for our generation. It's probably 3 generations down the road also. So.
Chairman Fredericks, with that being said, Commissioner Arthod, I don't think we need this whole radius. With you saying that, with generations, I mean, as a county commissioner and a taxpayer, for me to be put into the ETZ zone, I mean, it doesn't benefit me, it doesn't hurt me. But just like yesterday, I got a call. This lady's in the ETZ zone. I just don't think that there's a communication between city and county right now, because she's having a problem and the city said, call the county. So then she calls the county, and the county's like, oh, you got to call the city. And I'm just worried about this bigger expansion, that we already have a smaller expansion. We have all these developments that aren't developed in the city. And then you're just making, I mean, I can see with the Patterson Lake. I can see with the airport. So work on those two, but then why do you need the 72-mile radius for everything else?
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Mr. Odom.
I think it's important to note, if you look at the current map, the city, the existing ETZ, does not take up the existing 2 miles right now. And I think what we're talking about is putting a subcommittee together to figure out which areas of that 4-mile expansion would go into a new ETZ. I mean, if you look at the current map, there's a good portion of the 2-mile radius that is not in the existing ETZ. So I think that's what we're talking about here, is getting a group together to do exactly what you're saying, Commissioner Arthod. So,
thank you, Mr. Odom. And that's agreed. I don't think anybody here intends to just draw a big circle and say we're taking it over. And that's not the intention. I don't believe.
Mr. Chairman, if I could ask to add, the intent of the map was just to show the boundary of the 4-mile area as indicated. And obviously, that's not what we're planning to do right now. Just two other things to add to what Mr. Winningham was talking about. We have worked with Stark County quite successfully on the West Dickinson plan and then the airport overlay in the past, so outside of our ETZ. And you know, that's the kind of spirit and the kind of work that we actually want to do and continue to do in the areas that we see the city expanding to, that would be mutually beneficial for both city and county. So we are processing, probably November, a couple of exclusions as well. The exclusions are de-annexations to the city. So that will affect this map slightly, not greatly, but slightly. And, you know, we've viewed those areas as areas that we're not providing and not going to provide service for anytime soon, because they are in the city. Because it would be very costly for the city to provide those services, and so we're going to exclude those. So that's coming up too. So we are looking at more of a process of an infill in our existing city where we can actually provide the services that Mr. Winningham said. We spent 306, or it's actually 312 now, I think. The number keeps going up. It's like the debt ceiling. But, you know, we spent $312 million over this period of this comprehensive plan to improve development and encourage development within the city of Dickinson and its close lying areas. So just wanted to add those few things. The comp plan should be reviewed on a 5-year basis. Yes, we can review it whenever we want, but most definitely in every 5 years. Staff did want to review it within the 5-year time frame and go after some funding, but we weren't successful in getting funding. So that's why we're here today.
Thank you, Mr. Hadley.
Mr. Hadley, do you have any idea when we expanded to the current ETZ and what our population was at that time?
I'm going to ask Mr. Josephson to, because he's been here for the entire haul of when the ETZ was established. I know we cleaned it up through a process a few years ago. If you remember, we brought all the properties in and did the zoning transition process that should have really been done during the process when the initial ETZ was established. So we cleaned it up and did it then. Stephen, can you maybe give some light on when the ETZ was actually created? Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioner Steve Josephson. I actually found something. There was it's hard to say. I'm just going on what records we had, you know, that the city had. I did find something actually back at the end of the 20th century. I think it was in when the current zoning ordinance was adopted. It did include ETZ expansion, and I believe that was in the late 1990s. There was another ETZ expansion that was done in 2011, and that's most of what you see right now. There was another one done, I believe it was in 2013, and that was done after a number of annexations. had taken place and pushed it out a little bit further, especially out onto the west side. I believe that was 13 or 14 when that when that ordinance was done, and that was the time that the current one was established.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph.
Thanks, Steve.
Anyone else have any comments?
I'll just make one comment. Brian Winningham, City Administrator again. Mr. Josephson, thank you for some of the history in that. As we reviewed the history, we saw that it was episodic in order for the planning both bodies of elected officials to make those plans. And so it was during that rush of development. And so I don't want to use the word panic, but basically immediate action decisions that required the city to adopt the comprehensive plan, to look at the future. That was all put into the city code, which makes it more complex. So everything we do now is bound by the city code. So I don't have a lot of leeway in determining what to do or not to do when it's already in our code, unless I change the ordinance. The last ordinance update, as Mr. Josephson referred to, incorporated all of those changes in one full swoop into the city code, and that was extraterritorial jurisdiction, that was the comprehensive plan. And so as a city staff, we're going back and reviewing what's actually in the city code to see where we're out of sequence. If you watch some of our meetings now, you'll see that this should be boring government operations. It should be. It shouldn't be. I think we should all pay attention to everything government does, but I think it should be a day-to-day grind for most of the city staff trying to get it right. There was a number of things within our ordinance right now that we've had to change that you've seen throughout the last several meetings with the City Commission, and those are very small changes. How to put certain classifications of business in certain areas, whether that's going to be in. It's a funny story. You could read the newspaper. There's some good articles on it, but essentially how to adapt and put different things within our Chapter 39. Where do we classify certain businesses? Where do we put those into consideration? And once you do that, there's third and fourth order effects within our own code that once we change one small thing in the code, we have to go and distribute all of that code and make sure that it's all sequential and they don't conflict. And that's a difficult task in a lean municipality. I think we're a lean city. I think we have very small departments. And so I think they work really hard to get it right. And and primarily when it's a complaint-based operation, where a citizen comes in and says, "Why can't I do this?" And then immediately we may not have read that, even though I think we try to read all our code and try to make sure we're understanding all of it. And that's where a lot of change happens, when a citizen comes in and says, "I want to do something," or "I want to apply." As you're seeing right now with certain applications for business use. So I just want to make that point that I think that it's always going to be dynamic because we're people and we want to change with the environment. And I think that's the challenge. Get all that data to the city staff whenever the citizens feel like they're not getting, I don't want to call it due process, but they're not getting their voice heard. I am always available to talk to any citizen and give a very reasonable answer. If I don't have the answer, and most of the time I don't, I will find it, and I will come back to you, and I will explain why this decision was made. And sometimes I will agree when the decision was bad, but that's what elections are for. So that's all I'd say. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I guess to kind of bring this full circle here, what I'm hearing from the majority of the comments is that the city and the county need to work together to get this right. And the suggestion that was initially brought up was to designate a subcommittee to, again, bring this back to this committee for further discussion, identify and narrow down those particular areas of concern. And so I would recommend that the city, as well as the county, whether you do that today or you do that at your next meeting or whenever that's beneficial for you, designate those representatives within the county that you want to participate in that meeting. The city, I would recommend, do the same. And we can schedule a meeting bring these maps, discuss this information, and bring it back as we've had an opportunity to thoroughly vet those particular areas of concern. So that would be my recommendation moving forward, and to kind of get this off dead center here, is to bring that back. Maybe that's, again, next month, maybe that's a couple months from now, depending on when you guys can meet. But to schedule a time to go through this and really kind of hammer this out and bring back a thorough, detailed proposal for not only the city, but for the county as well, for the benefit of not only the city residents, but the county residents, because again, we are all in agreement that we are working toward continued growth, and we've got to work together to get this right. So that would be my recommendation for you as chairman.
So,
I do have a question.
Yep, Mr. Marsh.
Mr. Winningham, is there a timeline on these grants? I mean, a deadline for applying for these airport and for the water, clean water, or whatever you were referring to earlier?
So I'll give you an example. The League of Cities for North Dakota is what we work with when we talk to some of our legislators. We received an email yesterday that said, hey, by noon today, we need to have all of your so-called projects that we may be able to get on a legislative timeline, because they're going to have a special session. And so that's one example of the timeliness, and that's our own state. The federal government makes it very difficult. And nobody's here to defend the federal government, but they make it very difficult for probably good reasons. I can't tell you what those are, but probably good reasons to have a very bureaucratic nature of how you apply for grants. And some of those grants, you have to literally data mine to try to figure out where those grants are. If you go to grants.gov and you can figure it out as a citizen and come forward and say, this grant would be good for the city, I would welcome that. That's a bunch more sensors in the public saying, what about this grant? For our city staff, we go and try to do it on a day-to-day basis and find these grants. But a lot of time they're based on the budget that's currently not passed. So we're waiting for the legislator or the Congress to pass that infrastructure bill, which will then open the floodgates, and we want to be first, like we're trying to do with the state of North Dakota. We worked on it. We developed a plan yesterday that we'll send to the legislator today before noon that has some of those items. One of them is Patterson Lake. Even though we're out of sequence, because we haven't done the ordinance for ETZ, but I still think we should at least tell our legislators what we think is happening. So it's very difficult. So I would say that if you go to any federal agency that is allowing a grant, Department of Justice is one of them, there's always a timeline. And it's always, I call it, flaming hoops. And it's very, very difficult to do that if we're having to use the tyranny of agendas, right? When I say commission, some things are commission-based. If they are something that it affects our budget, I have to go to our city commission in order to get it approved. So what we're trying to do is apply for grants, and then if we're awarded the grants, we still have to go back through the commission. And that does make it difficult. So we're trying to look at authorities in place that would allow city staff to apply for grants faster. So it's a difficult challenge. The county will have the same challenge, but as we work together, I think we're better off.
Mr. Winningham? Well, I guess if we're all agreeable on the process of how we should go forward, we just need to determine how we're going to appoint these members. So I'm open to suggestions.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Decker.
my recommendation is that we place 2 city commissioners, 2 county commissioners, 1 park board member, because they do have a large encompassing part of this. Also ask a individual from the airport board, because they're part of this process, and then include some city and county staff to assist those members with their as they hash out the boundaries, and then have that group meet so that they can in a public forum have them meet so they can work their way around. I know Bismarck and Burley County, when they worked through this, a lot of their decision was made when I spoke with them, with the city administrator from Bismarck. a lot of the boundaries that they looked at, geography played into some of it. Some of this is not going to develop. We can be honest. I mean, it's not going to develop. So I think we can come to a decision as a subcommittee and bring it back to planning and zoning on both planning and zonings, both county and city, and then bring them recommendations to the commissions. So I guess that unless the county commissioners are opposed to that, that would be my recommendation, is we do a couple of city, county commissioners, a member of the park board, a member of the airport. They are separate taxing entities too, the park board and the airport. I don't feel there's a need for any within the school districts. There's no redistricting. I know there's been some discussion online about school zones changing. None of the school zones change because of this decision. That's a separate, whole different animal. So,
Chairman Frederick?
Yes.
I agree with you, Mr. Decker. I just also think that maybe we should add 2 people from city planning and zoning and 2 from county planning and zoning.
My only concern is then we end up getting so big and trying to schedule a meeting when you have, it's a lot easier scheduling 5, 6, 7 people than 10, 9, or 10, 11, 12. The city runs the bus on this. I mean, let's be clear. They have it. So I'm more comfortable with a lower number than a bigger number, but whatever is agreed to, I'm amenable to.
Do we run issues if we have county, if we have 2 from zoning and 2 from each zoning, plus 2 commissioners from each side, we run the risk of having, well, we'll notice the meetings, but then they're not, when there's more than 2 commissioners together or whatnot, then it's, the public meeting notices become more stringent. And so is that a concern if we have too many like that?
It's Commissioner Soblock, it's 2 separate. You have 2 from the commission, from the county, 2 from the city, so you don't have a quorum because they vote in individually.
But when if we pull in from the P and Zs, from both P and Zs.
Right, that's why my recommendation is just the 2 county, the 2 city commissioners, 1 from park board, 1 from airport. That way, along with city staff, then you're not running the risk of, it's still going to be a public meeting, but and notice it, but
okay.
So it's not a quorum from either entity, county or
Right,
city.
that's what the word I was looking for, quorum. Thank you.
County and city P and Zs, so I think that presentation needs to probably go to your county P and Z, which I think we have 2 commissioners that sit on your county P and Z, city commissioners, and then you can bring it to our that recommendation can come to our P and Z, and then move forward from there. I'm good with that. Everybody else is.
Mr. Chairman, just a quick comment. I don't know if Ms. Arthad's comment was for city planning and zoning commissioners or staff, but I do think it's important that Mr. Hadley and Mr. Josephson are involved in these discussions. They're boots on the ground. They're going to be the ones that are going to have to deal with this primarily. So getting their input is going to be vital, in my opinion, at the outset. And I think it would put them at a disadvantage if they are not involved in this process. So I think at a minimum for the staff, that should be those 2 individuals involved in those discussions. I think it can look either way, but I think as part of that discussion,
I would rather keep staff advisory part of it. There could show bias that if we have more city staff, that's my opinion on it.
it's a viable opinion, and I think having both Mr. Hadley and Mr. Josephson will bring a perspective from the county. It will bring a perspective from the city, because let's face it, I mean, these gentlemen are, again, boots on the ground. They deal with it, and I think they just bring a perspective that we don't. And so that would be my recommendation. Again, it's just simply a recommendation. I don't know if either gentleman are really jumping at the chance, but that would be, that again would be my thought process in that.
I mean, staff from either the county or the city, you'd be an advisory role and not an actual part of the recommendation.
But attend the meeting.
But attend the meetings,
Yes.
correct.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just for input.
Mr. Chairman, I would agree.
So then, I don't know, you want to pick now, or do you want to?
Why don't you let your chairman, your president pick the two, and our chairman will pick the two. That way we don't have to have a long discussion on it, and then we'll let the city's taking the lead on this, so I would then ask Mr. Hadley to kind of organize the first meeting. This does not have to be a long process. The shorter, the better, I think, and go from there.
And then we'll ask the airport.
Yeah, exactly.
And airport and park and rec can just make their recommendation who they're going to send. I'm good with that. Are you good?
Well, we have our meeting in the morning, so I think Dean can make that recommendation at our meeting tomorrow.
Okay. We just had ours yesterday, so we'd be 2 weeks out, but I think Mr. Decker can make that decision without having to call.
Oh, yeah. And I think Dean can make that decision, you know, but I still think we should have it on our public record at our meeting.
Yeah, so once you guys make that decision, or just contact Mr. Decker, Mr. Winningham. And
then we could all,
I will.
we can also have our staff then be attending the meeting then do your thing.
Whatever staff gets for it.
Mr. Chairman, can I?
Mr. Hadley?
Just to clarify, so after we establish the board members and that's given to Mr. Winningham and Mr. Decker, then I will schedule a time frame. Is there a better time frame for, that's going to be a little bit of a challenge to schedule a time that's going to be convenient for everyone that's going to want to be involved. I'll surely try to do that, but maybe if there's any suggestions on days or times, that would be great to know up front rather than just guessing. And then the one last thing I have for the county representatives that are here, please take those maps with you. We can print more. It's a good discussion item internally for yourself. You can start with markers and start writing some ideas on there and bring that to the meeting as well. So, thank you.
We will.
Huh? I'm going to take another one. That's fine, you take it.
Oh, it's working. All right, the next item on our agenda would be item 4.
Excuse me.
Oh, that's the next part. Yes. The next item on our agenda would be item 4, public issues of concern, not on the agenda. At this time, anybody in the public that has any concerns with this issue or any other issue, you can step forwards, please state your name, ask your questions or concerns, and we will try to get you an answer. So.
My name is Dean Berwick. I'm a Stark County resident. I live 5 miles west of Dickinson here. In 2020, I owned Badlands Trailers, and I had this, which was annexed into the city. And the sewer system failed. So I called the city and said, hey, I'd like to hook up, because previous year I hooked up to the water with the city. So I called and said, hey, I'd like to hook up to the city sewer. Oh, Mr. Berwick, we don't have no lines out there. I said, well, when are you going to get them? Well, we don't even have a plan. So now I'm hearing that, and I understand the tax thing with the airport and the clean water with Patterson Lake, but you're talking about running sewer lines and water lines clear out to the airport. In the city, you don't even have them here. Where you guys annexed them in, it was a huge fight, and they're paying full taxes, and they don't even have sewer. So, and the other one that I look at is when you take West Villard out there towards I-94 business loop, you guys are going to put in that huge mall and stuff. It's nothing but weeds. You know, we take care of our property out in the rural country far better than that. So what I'm saying is take care of what you already got, especially the 2 miles you have, like Sandra Kuhn said, hey, fill in the holes, you know. So if you got to do spot ETZ, fine. But I think leave us alone out in that other 2 miles. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Berwick.
Christy Goodall. I live out on 116th on 39th Street Southwest. And I've had several concerns regarding this ETZ zone and what that's going to mean for a lot of our areas out in that western part of that zone. One of the biggest concerns that I have is that area around Patterson Lake that's been referred to. As we know, in June of 2021, just this spring, the North Dakota Game and Fish Department published a 69-page document on best management practices in regards to wind energy development in North Dakota. And I'm just going to quote a few things from it. It says, North Dakota is a wildlife-rich state that has many resident and migratory species that depend upon the grasslands, wetlands, and the sparse woodlands that the state provides. And over the last century, urban expansion, conversion of native habitats to cropland, energy development, and other anthropogenic changes have greatly altered this landscape. And as a result, many species have suffered as their habitats have been fragmented, degraded, and even lost. In 2007, there were 7 threatened or endangered species in North Dakota. In 2019, that number has increased to 12, with 13 more being petitioned or under review for listing. As managing for listed species is far more restrictive, difficult, and expansive than preventing listings, it is vital that we maintain the key habitat resources needed to sustain healthy populations on this landscape. So in 2015, the North Dakota Game and Fish Department State Wildlife Action Plan was approved. That was reviewed with a group of officials from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and state wildlife agencies, and a public review process with input from a wide array of conservation groups, academics, NGOs, farm groups, and members of the public followed. The SWAP serves as North Dakota's comprehensive wildlife conservation strategy for the next 10 years and is the principal document for safeguarding fish and wildlife species in North Dakota. The SWAP has identified 115 species of conservation priority that represented rare, declining, or unique species in North Dakota. And the ultimate goal of the SWAP is to prevent further listings under the Endangered Species Act. It's a habitat-based strategies that has identified direct threats and conservation actions for grasslands, wetlands, lakes, rivers, streams, and riparian areas, badlands, and upland forest. The SWAP has also identified conservation actions that are needed to prevent further declines to rare and unique species. And that document, that 69-page document, again, goes further into detail. In accordance to the City Code, 3901003 of Dickinson City Code, it says that this section outlines how the city plans to stay on track to provide good governance in zoning, as well as to serve the public health, safety, and general welfare of the city, and included in the very end, encourage compatibility of adjacent land uses and protect environmentally sensitive areas. This area in the western part of Patterson Lake, out by where Marathon is building, as well as proposing their wind energy project, falls within a identified wetlands zoned area. In a letter that was written to Marathon officials on August 2nd of 2021, it was stated specifically to them, There may be few impacts to grasslands, but this project falls within both the state wildlife action plans, priority areas, and the high impact to native wildlife and habitat area in the department's wind energy development in North Dakota best management practices that was just put out in 2021. The project is encircled by the Heart River and impacts to the species that depend on the river, and associated riparian woodlands may be negatively impacted by the development of turbines, specifically species of conservation priority, such as the little brown bat. That is a huge nesting area for this bat. The bats are long-lived, reproduce slowly, and migrate long distances, making them particularly susceptible to wind development and other development. Acoustic surveys should begin at a minimum of 2 years of any pre-construction to assess the risk of projects that pose the risk that projects pose to local bat populations. The bald eagle populations as well are increasing significantly in North Dakota, and the number of active nests has increased from 10 known sites in the year 2000 to more than 300 in the year 2020. I have also witnessed and have photographs of several different types of raptors in that area.
Ms. Goodall, I don't mean to
Sorry.
interrupt you. I don't even mean to. I'm not sure if you were here when we talked about this in the beginning, but this board is not going to have anything to do with the marathon section, the wind tower section. That has been left with the county, and it will continue to be with the county going forward from this day on. So this board will not have it. Changing
Perfect.
the ETZ will have nothing to do with marathon. We're going to exclude them out on purpose
Commissioner Frederick?
and leave it to the county.
All due respect, but Mr. Whittingham was talking about encompassing Patterson Lake as part of that project. It's something as part of the ETZ zone, and I certainly want that to be taken into consideration as to what the further urban development around that area will do to that swap area.
Well-
So please, I would like that to be taken, I want it to go further than just the marathon project. I mean, an expansion of this ETZ zone and encompassing that Patterson Lake area, please understand the impact that will have on the wildlife, on that swap area processes, especially in that western part of that lake.
Well, and Dickinson Parks and Rec now owns all that land around there, that's 1,700 acres, and to my understanding, it cannot be developed, correct?
When we got that from the Bureau of Reclamation this past year, there is no residential development. The only thing that can be used for that land we got is recreational purposes, and that's it, wildlife type things. So no, that will not be developed.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Goodall. Anyone else in the public have any comments or concerns, please step forward.
Bob Zent. A lot of long answers to some short questions, so hopefully I can keep it short. I've been on the airport board for 19 years, but I've been off for quite a little while. And I'm still involved with Civil Air Patrol, so I'd like to address the airport. The idea of bringing water and sewer out there is very viable. There's tremendous potential for commercial development in and around the airport, and that needs to be regulated and encouraged. So I think it's very good that you are considering the zoning around the airport. My only thing that I want to have all the people keep in mind is, commercial on and around the airport is very good. Residential gets a little more problematic. And if you look at any airport in the country, Denver's my classic example. They moved way out in the boondocks because of the complaints of people that were living around the airport. Well, guess what? People moved out to the airport. You need to watch out for that. I don't know what you can come up with for an answer, but you need to watch out for that. It's just a chronic problem. Our airport has potential for a lot of expansion. And as you grow as a city, that airport's going to need to grow. So don't box it in. Very important. Do not box it in. So just thank you for keeping that in mind.
Thank you, Mr. Zent. Anyone else in the audience have any comments or concerns, please step forward.
Chairman, Commissioners, my name is Dale Berwick. I live 3651 117th Avenue Southwest. I couldn't hear some of the comments and stuff, but I need clarification on this grant process and why it's important to expand the ETZ 4 miles for that if it depended on what the city population was, or even the county for that matter. If that's what determined it, what does that have to do with the ETZ? Why do you need to expand 4 miles for these grant processes? Did I misunderstand, or I guess I would like to understand that more.
Mr. Berwick, Dale Berwick. Thank you for that question. I think that was one example. The question really related to what was one of the considerations for the city. That's just one of them as far as grant, looking for the ability to apply for grants. I guess as a private citizen, I can apply for a grant, but without the ETZ expansion covering that jurisdiction, the city would really have no purview. The city would not, other than going to the park board, who doesn't own the water, the city has the most substantial ability and the wherewithal by the federal government to even apply for that grant. I'm not even sure if the county could do that. I haven't explored that enough as far as how the county government can do it. But the population for the city of Dickinson would allow us then to go after that grant. The comments that were made about the airport, that was a plan offered or asked to the city if we could expand that that sewer and water. I mean, honestly, I don't know if the city wants to do that because of the cost. The only way we would do that is whether we would receive a grant. I think that's, for us, we would be spending taxpayer dollars that wouldn't help the citizens necessarily, but it would help economic development and growth. But I think that's why we would seek a grant. And that's one of the considerations for us. With Patterson Lake, we heard about the considerations for wildlife. I have read the 589-page SWAP plan that was published in 2015. I have looked through that. I think that is why Patterson Lake, as with toxic algae, is actually a risk to the citizens if we needed emergency water. So in order for us to do that, we have to have some authority. And so ETZ, extraterritorial zoning, is actually extraterritorial zoning authority. And that authority then would be granted to the city commission, which then gives us the ability to sign grants. So we can't even apply for it without at least extending that authority. Does that make sense?
It does. I understand that part of it. But in the same paragraph, whatever, you're asking for private entities, charities, whatever, to apply for grants to help you guys out. I don't understand what that has to do with ETZ. I understand going to the airport, doing Patterson Lake. I don't have problems with that. Going out to agriculture land 4 miles just because you can, it's not really, you're not selling me on the benefit part of it. It just sounds like we can do it, so we're going to do it. I guess the cost-benefit ratio in my head, it's not there. I understand ETZs. You need the plan for growth, no problem. Dickinson is not Bismarck or Fargo or heck, even Jamestown now for that matter. So I'm asking you just to, think this through. We don't need to go darn near to South Arc as an extraterrestrial zone. For what purpose? Just because you can? That's the way it's sounding to me. It's the way it's looking to me. So hopefully some level-headedness is done with this committee you put together and stuff, and you think this process through. There's not a lot of benefit that I'm seeing to expand it 4 miles. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Berwick.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment, Mr. Berwick, because I think it's a super important question. There was no process before. So what you're saying is, I think you're agreeing, this is the process. There was no process before. We're cleaning up years of no process. So this is the start of the process. If we didn't have this process, another city commission could do, by the statute of North Dakota, can just do this. That literally, it can't be stopped unless you change the legislation in the state. We're doing this because I think it's important to work together. The city does not have to do this. We also do not have to ask the county for permission. That's simply put. We don't have to, and this commission wants to work together. So what you're seeing here is the process. Without this process, I think we'd all be in jeopardy.
I agree. This is the process. You have the right to do it. You can do it. But you've already got 2 miles that need infilling. Need infilling before you go start another 2 miles out. That's what I hope you take into consideration. Thank you.
Agreed. All right, thank you, Mr. Berwick, Mr. Winningham. Anyone else in the public or online at 456-7006 have any questions? Please step forward.
Hello, Jeff Itzik, Dickinson City resident and Stark County City resident. And I'd like to speak on behalf of the people out here who have been speaking but have no actual say. And by that I mean Mr. Berwick, Mr. Zent, some of the other people who are here speaking, they don't get to vote in the city. They're not city residents. They're Stark County residents. So it's very nice that you guys have opened this up to the county and that you're working together, and I appreciate that effort by the city of Dickinson. But at the end of the day, none of the people in the the ETZ zone have the ability to vote for you, Mr. Frederick, or for Mr. Decker, or for anybody else who sits here and oversees Dickinson Planning and Zoning's board. They may be granted the right to speak, but they cannot vote. And so they have no accountability directly to you, and you have none to them. Yet you're seeking to govern them through the ETZ zone. Okay. What's more, because there's a permitting process that instead of going to the county now, goes to the city of Dickinson, this is a form of tax. A permit to a government agency is a tax. I just spoke with Senator Wardner last night. He outlined the North Dakota state budget and all the special fees and everything else, which are income, they're tax to the state government. City is no different. So what you essentially have with an ETZ zone is taxation without representation. That is the nuts and bolts of this. No matter which way you dice it. And if you recall, we fought a Revolutionary War over that in one aspect.
All we're doing is, we have a joint agreement with the county to handle the building permitting. Okay, if it wasn't us, it would have been Forsgren, who was the previous building permitting company that was from out of state, that took 60% of the fees with them, or whatever it was.
Yes.
80% of the fees. They took them out of state because they weren't even here.
Yes.
All we're doing for the county is providing them a service.
I'm not talking about that aspect. I'm talking about the ETZ zone where like earlier today, you guys had the say in how things were zoned for people who can't vote for you.
Mr. Fitz.
And they pay the fee to the city.
For clarification, we already do that. The county already.
I know you do.
No, right. ETZ is not relevant to that. So this discussion you're having for ETZ, I guess we can go and have a different discussion with the county, but our agreement we already do that. So it's not, we're not changing that. We're already, our building official already receives the permits. So is there something different that you could suggest?
Well, that would be for this committee to discuss, but to keep in mind. But the point remains, whether it exists currently, and it does exist currently in the ETZ zone you have, these people can't speak by voting, okay? Not in the city of Dickinson. So this is why I'm here. on behalf of those people who can't vote for you, okay? Because all the other people who are speaking here today, to my knowledge, couldn't vote for any of the City of Dickinson people. And I'm saying, I agree with you working together with the county, but you need to keep it as limited as possible so that you affect less of the residents in this situation than you already do.
I have one question for you.
Sure.
So by combining services, we're actually saving money. You understand that, right?
I do understand that.
And then do you understand that both of these planning boards are appointed by the commissions? So the
I
city
do
commission-
understand that.
These are not elected positions. They're appointed by the city commission or the county commission.
And they answer to the city commission, who is elected.
But they're.
Or they answer to the county commission, who is elected.
Correct.
But the county commission electoral board doesn't govern the ETZ.
But we have county representation, including a commissioner and somebody that lives in the county. That's part of the process.
That's part of the process. But they still do not have the right to vote in the city.
But they have.
So,
But if they're not happy with who they appoint to they can vote them out on the county board, can they not?
how many is the quorum here? There are 2 votes. So they don't have the power, they can have input, they can have votes, but they do not have the majority.
Mr. Commissioner, if I could add in, as part of this process, to address one of the concerns you have is that we would add more representation from the county, and that's required by the state statute. I think what Mr. Friedrich is referring to is that the county commission, who's in charge of the representation and who people vote for in Stark County, can designate whoever they want to represent them on this board, to represent the voices of the public that you're talking about. And then on the fees are a big topic usually, but they really aren't, because planning fees are they're paid by the applicant, so taxpayers do not subsidize the cost of a development coming through, and the taxpayers paying to have a new development that they may or may not want to go through the process. So planning fees are based on that. It's different than building permit fees. Building permit fees are for the product that you're building.
Yes.
Planning fees are basically fees that cover the cost, so taxpayers do not subsidize the cost of new development that they may or may not want. So just to clarify that.
And that was understood. But a fee or a permit to a government agency, whichever way you call it, a hunting license, is a tax. It's from a government agency you're required to pay money to. That was my point. So I understand the distinctions between the two. Thank you for clarifying regardless, but it's still a tax, and at the end of the day, that's what it remains.
Correct, if you want the definition, but it was a tax on the people that want to do development, not a tax on the people that may not want it.
Or the people who want to build a building. So,
I'm separating the planning issue with the ETZ is what we're discussing.
except in the ETZ, if they want a permit, they have to go through the city
That's
to build a building.
That's correct.
And so then they pay the city, but they don't get to vote in the city. So now they have no representation for their tax. That is my point. Okay? And it's an existing condition, I understand that, in the existing ETZ, but you guys are proposing expanding it. And so I just want you guys to be mindful of the impact on people in that respect.
To be clear, Mr. Fitzik, we do the whole county now, not just the ETZ, the whole county.
So that's the separate issue I was going to get into.
Okay.
So we have heard that comment from Mr. Winningham and other people several times. We already do the whole county. The building codes are the same. Well, if the building codes are the same, what's wrong with the county planning and zoning taking care of all of this? Why do you need to expand the ETZ zone 4 miles out if the codes are exactly the same? Again and again, we've heard, well, it's so when the city expands, everything's harmonious. And yet, then you turn around and say, the building codes are exactly the same.
Building code doesn't have anything to do with zoning. The building code is for the safety of the product being built. We inspect it for fire, for structure. That's the same in county or city, and everywhere in the country. It's not just here. There's an IBC, International Building Code, that both the county and the city adopt.
Yes, sir.
And it reads exactly the same. So we provide that service to make sure that IBC code is being followed on any building. Now, zoning is different.
Yes.
Zoning, when you're within that 4 miles, we like to have a process where we can see where our future expansion might go. Outside the 4 miles is probably way outside our purview. That's what we talked about today. There's areas in that 4 mile we're not going to be interested in because they probably will never develop. But there's some areas that we want to be interested in.
To that score, and I agree with you on that point, okay? That's proof with the yellow portions of the map.
Yes.
However, cities, municipalities, counties have very little memory. You just had Mr. Josephson come up and couldn't even pinpoint for you exactly when the ETZ zone started. Somewhere around 2000. Around the turn of the century, I think was his exact term. Okay? Then he referenced the panic during the 2011 expansion of the ETZ zone to where it's at now. So when it comes to comprehensive planning and going forward, first of all, people don't look back when they're in government because government changes. And the records are not what people think they are. If you work as a contractor and you contact City Hall or a county for records, sometimes they're very good for an area. And sometimes there are no records at all. And yet it all went through a permit process at some point. Any contractor who works in Dickinson area or anywhere else knows this to be true in any municipality. And so cities have no memory, counties have no memory. When you plan forward, you're looking back to a date you don't even know when it started from. And so you're asking up to 4 miles of people, and I understand you say you're not going to take them all, but you're asking up to 4 miles of people. Trust us, we have your best interest in mind over here, but we don't remember where we started. And we had a panic situation in 2011, and we kind of expanded, and we made a mess of it, which we need to clean up now, using Mr. Winningham's word.
But we did that in 2013 with our comprehensive plan. That's
So,
what we did.
All I'm asking on this is for you guys to consider all of those people and those aspects. There's an ancient term for, not ancient, but old term for government philosophically. It's called Leviathan. Government grows because that's what government does. And so I applaud the fact that you guys are working with the county in this when you would not have to. But that also doesn't mean that that's going to stay this way. So please consider putting those kind of measures in effect permanently so that another planning and zoning board, another city commission takes these kinds of concepts to heart in writing that's remembered, not forgotten when it goes forward. That was what I had to say.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzler.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the public have any comments or concerns? Please step forward.
Hi, I'm Tammy Obagewicz, and I live on Lutz's 4th subdivision. And there's like 50-some homes out there. How was this ETZ communicated to anybody out there? Or anybody in the farmland, anything around there, that this was happening? I didn't receive any certified letter. I don't think any of my neighbors did. How
do we notice it?
Mr. Chairman, customarily on land use, large land use discussions, and this was noticed in the paper as we're required to do, if we were going to adopt city zoning or county zoning comprehensively, we aren't required to send you a certified letter individually to do that. So if we were going to do an ETZ map, which is, I think we've published in the past, we would do an actual map that was published and to give you indication that was in it. But right now, there's nothing to publish because all we're doing is organizing the process to come up with the boundaries. So we can't tell you whether or not you're in that boundary or not today. Because that committee that was just formed is going to meet, discuss, talk about where the boundaries would be reasonable to have, and then move that forward. The meeting that we have through that recommendation from that board that goes to Stark County and goes to the City Planning Commission will be public hearings that we will advertise, and those maps will be very published and available to the public to see, and you'll be able to tell at that time whether or not it would apply to you or not.
And you'll advertise in the press, how many residents get the press?
How many residents?
Yeah.
No.
How many people
We
out
will
there?
advertise the area that would be affected.
Well, how are you going to do that?
So much like, I don't know how you get your information. If you, I guess it was yesterday, if you're on Facebook, you didn't get any because it was shut down. So we're concerned about how public gets noticed at all times. So one of the ways is our current website. Is it reliable? It's generally what most people use in the U.S. now is the internet.
As long as you click on the right option.
Right. And so that's
So if you never click on the right option, you're never going to see what's going on.
For one, I know this doesn't seem exciting. This is exciting for a city to have this much interaction with the public in a hearing. And so I'm thankful that you made it here today. I'm glad that however you were noticed, you're here.
Mhm.
So that's good. I think that one of the things that we have to consider is putting information on our website that's easy to access. Right now it's not easy because we're trying to save money. One of the ways municipalities do this is they get held hostage by a software company. We thankfully have a person that can do that in-house. What we're trying to do now as a city is roll out a new website that allows you to, click easier on something you can see.
Okay.
So we only are required by the state of North Dakota to give notice in our local paper. We could change that. We could pick the paper we want to, but as you see, there's only one. So we could do other ways to make notification. One of the ways is planning and zoning notifications. Any of these meetings, they do have a public agenda. They are noticed in the paper. The minutes are noticed in the paper, and we pay a substantial amount for those minutes in the paper. I think the paper should be free, but I know that that's not economically viable.
It's not going to happen.
So what I would like to tell you is that if you look on our website and pull the minutes from previous meetings, so a little bit over a month ago, we had a planning and zoning meeting, and we discussed ETZ. I'm not exactly sure how they did it in the past, but I think going forward, this is the way it should be done. That we put the information out, that we talk about it publicly, that people who quite frankly probably aren't paying attention to what we're doing every day.
Well, you're in the city.
That's right, you
We
shouldn't
don't
have
care.
to. So, right, so that's a question to the county also. How do they deliver information? If you go to the county's website and you go to buildings, you look at, maybe I want a permit, it says, go to the city, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then our process has to be pretty solid. We have to be able to explain that. And if you don't ever have the answer given to you reasonably, even if you're in the county, you can always come to the city and ask me. And I think that's the best way to do it. Because if I don't have the answer, I'll find it. And I think, Mr. Hadley, trying to explain the process, this is what we're attempting to do now, is put it in the public sphere so that you know that we're not trying to do something that, as Mr. Fitzik talked about, the state of North Dakota legislated this. So the voice that you have right now is through your district representatives. That's a state law. We're not guessing here. This is a state law. So go to those representatives that are your legislators and say, we don't like this. And many municipalities in North Dakota have already done it. They've tried to change this legislation. So we're following the law. We're also following what we think is like we've heard, the best interests of this population. And it's not always perfect. But I'm thankful you're here to ask the question.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm just concerned. We moved out of city limits into the subdivision to be away from the city, because we didn't want all your rules and regulations. And now you're saying, well, now we might have to have your rules and regulations. And you're saying there's no fees. Well, what about the dogs? Are we going to have to license our dogs? Are we going to have a leash law? Is there a noise ordinance then? I mean, is all that going to take place in our subdivision?
Let me just address a couple of those. Just noise ordinance, there's noise ordinances in Stark County. I know there's been some complaints lately that I believe the sheriff and planning department have gone out on. So you have existing noise ordinances in Stark County. We have them as well. Leash laws and those types of things, they're confined to the city limits. So it would not extend, it doesn't extend into the current ETZ.
If you're a farmer and you have 5 dogs, you're gonna have to license your 5 dogs?
No, you don't need to come talk to us.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's a number of things that when you're in the city limits, there's completely different regulations that apply. This is only talking about land use regulations. So if in your residential subdivision, you wanted to do something that was commercial, then it might affect you. Then it might affect you, I can say.
Yeah.
But other than that, I don't know that it's really going to affect you from the standpoint of, it sounds like you're in a developed residential area.
It's been there for years.
Yeah, so I don't know that it really, I don't know that you would ever notice a change.
You know, so what is the purpose? Okay, you want to get in the airport in Patterson Lake. Why are you doing all the rest?
We're not doing any of it yet, but whatever we wind up doing,
You know?
it will be for the best interest for not only the city, but the Stark County as a whole. So the airport, we've talked about that. Some of the areas for development, I mean, I would imagine that you would want complementary development happening somewhere around you that mimicked maybe what you
I
have
kind of
out
like
there.
the farmland.
You know, so
That's why we
it's-
move out there.
Right, right, but there, someday, there will be someone that does a rural development in your area. Don't know, I can't tell you when, but there will be.
We have to
because-
get more services in Dickinson. I mean, all our big stores are moving out. You have to go to Bismarck to shop. I mean, and then you're going to expand your city reach, but we don't have any services here. You want to expand, you want to expand, you want to bring more people here, but nobody's coming. You know, that's my opinion, so.
I don't disagree with you, but there is a lot more interest in the city of Dickinson lately since we hit the 25,000 threshold. That is a marker where people in retail and business start looking at you differently.
And how far over the 25 are we? 600?
25,600, Moyen knows the exact number.
600,000?
25,678 or something?
Well, the U.S. government has told us that it's 25,649.
Okay.
We've extrapolated, made some calculations based on utilities and services. We're probably closer to 28, but that's not the mark. The mark is whatever the federal government has told us, unless we do our own internal census.
Okay.
And so most rural retail is about 35,000 people. They don't realize that many people in the surrounding area, I call it punching above our weight, we basically have a strong tax base here. But most retailers, you gotta sell it to them that it's economically viable to come here if we're business friendly. So this is one of the ways you try to be business friendly. I'm not so sure if outside of Stark County that maybe we don't have the model to be business friendly. We want to be that way. These discussions, hopefully, if they're out in the public sphere and people look at it, say, oh, the city of Dickinson wants businesses to come here. That will then help us get services. And if you ask business owners in the city right now, for the mall in particular, it's very difficult to entice retail to get here. I can't go buy a men's shirt anywhere unless I just happen to hit Walmart on a certain day, and it's one brand. So I'm with you on not wanting to have to drive to Bismarck. I do want to shop here.
I'd love to shop here, but we don't, everything pulls out, so, you know, but thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Overgewich. Okay, anyone else in the public have any comments or concerns?
Andrew Schrank, resident of the city of Dickinson and also an engineer. Through my engineering work, I've done a fair amount of work in the ETZ. I'd just like to say I think the plan that was discussed this morning is a very good plan. I'm happy to see that we're looking at spots to grow instead of just a massive expansion of the ETZ. One thing I'd like to bring up is just the infrastructure considerations in the ETZ. In my opinion, it's not real clear in the ETZ who is responsible for reviewing the infrastructure and approving infrastructure, building infrastructure, all those things in the ETZ. It's been handled differently on different developments that we've done in the past. You know, at times we've had assurances required to build infrastructure with the city, where the city really has no final say in that infrastructure. It's ultimately county infrastructure or privately maintained infrastructure. So I think I just want to bring that up as a consideration as you guys move forward in your discussions. how are we going to handle the engineering side of things? Who's reviewing stormwater plans? Who's reviewing road plans? How is infrastructure being handled? How are development agreements being handled? Those are all things that I think could be more clear in the ETZ. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schrank. Anyone else in the public have any comments or concerns?
Good morning. I'm Troy Barkman. I live west on Highway 10, about 3.5 miles. The precedent that was set this morning as far as zoning and approving the application that was presented before you was taken into consideration. There was public input, and I felt that it was approved regardless of what the landowners around it felt. I hope that isn't a precedence of how this zoning is going to go forward with this extraterritorial zone. Jeff mentioned that we're having to follow all the city rules, but we have no representation. And I commend that you're allowing the commissioners, the Stark County commissioners, to join in on this, but I would ask that it would be a fair vote between them and that it would be set up equally so that that we're represented out there, because right now we're feeling like we're getting dictated upon with all the rules, but we have no representation. And that's what Jeff was stating with when he come up here as well. So I ask you that you put a lot of merit in what our officials that have listened to us throughout the process have to say for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes. Anyone else in the public have any questions or concerns, or anyone on the phone? Please come forward. All right, seeing none, we will close the public comments. Item 4, and we'll move on to item 5. Commissioners, any items that are not on the agenda that you would like to discuss? Okay, seeing none on that, we will close item 5. Item 6, we do not have any work session items for the day, so that moves us right to adjournment. I would look for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
I second.
Mr. Karski and Mr. Cordenoy, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.